Today, Prince Harry's possible return to the UK with Archie and Lilibet has once again detonated a familiar media frenzy, the kind that pretends to be concern while operating almost entirely on assumption and innuendo. You can feel the tension beneath the headlines, the barely disguised irritation that Harry is still doing things on his own terms. And right on cue, instead of focusing on the very real issue of safety, the question being pushed front and centre is framed like a cliffhanger from a soap opera. Will Meghan finally pull the trigger? It's dramatic, it's loaded, and it's intentionally misleading because it shifts responsibility away from systems and onto one woman who has been blamed for everything short of gravity itself. What's being carefully ignored in all this breathless speculation is that Harry has been consistent to the point of exhaustion. Since 2020, he has said the same thing over and over again. Without adequate protection, bringing his children to the UK is not something he can justify. This is not a vague fear. This is a man shaped by very public loss, relentless intrusion, and first-hand knowledge of what happens when warnings are dismissed. Yet, somehow, that lived experience is treated as paranoia rather than perspective. Now that a full-scale security review is being reconsidered for the first time in years, the entire narrative scaffolding critics have leaned on starts to wobble. Because once safety is back on the table, the favourite taunt, "Why doesn't he bring the kids?" loses its power. And when that happens, there's a scramble. The conversation doesn't soften, it redirects. And who does it redirect toward? Meghan Markle, once again promoted to the role of convenient obstruction. Former BBC commentator Jenny Bond, speaking to The Mirror, provides a perfect example of this balancing act. On one side, she acknowledges the obvious truth. If the security obstacle is removed, it would be reasonable to expect Harry to bring Archie and Lilibet to the UK. That's not radical insight, that's basic cause and effect. She even invokes a sentimental image, suggesting many people would welcome seeing the king reunited with the son he once called his darling boy, along with grandchildren he barely knows. It's warm, it's emotive, and it plays well in print. But then comes the pivot that has become almost ritualistic. Bond suggests that despite all this, Meghan herself might be the real stumbling block. She goes further, saying she's not convinced the public is ready for Meghan Part 2. And there it is, the reduction of a real person into a rerun nobody supposedly asked for. Not a mother, not a wife, not an individual with agency. Just a sequel. What's striking is that in the very next breath, Bond essentially explains why Meghan might not want to return at all. She openly admits that Meghan would likely face hostility in the UK and notes that she appears happy in California. That's not speculation, that's an acknowledgement of reality. And yet, instead of asking why that hostility still exists or who perpetuates it, the focus becomes why Meghan won't voluntarily place herself back in its path. The logic collapses under its own weight. Let's be clear here. Avoiding hostility is not manipulation, it's self-preservation. Meghan has already experienced what that environment can do to mental health, to safety, to basic peace of mind. Framing her reluctance as a problem rather than a rational response reveals how normalized mistreatment has become in this conversation. She's expected to endure it quietly, for optics, for tradition, for other people's comfort. There's also an unspoken fantasy floating beneath these discussions, one that certain commentators seem unable to let go of. The idea that Harry might return with the children while Meghan stays behind, not as a temporary arrangement, but as a symbolic one. It's the same narrative thread that's been pulled for years. Separate Harry from Meghan, and everything will magically reset. It's wishful thinking masquerading as analysis. But reality keeps interrupting that fantasy. Harry has shown, repeatedly, that he prioritizes unity, protection, and stability over appeasing critics. He's already lived the version of life where he ignored his instincts for the sake of duty. He knows where that road leads. Expecting him to suddenly reverse course because pundits are impatient is not realism, it's denial. And yet Meghan continues to be framed as the central obstacle. Security concerns. Somehow Meghan. Media hostility. Also Meghan. Institutional failure to adapt. Definitely Meghan. At this point, blaming her has become so reflexive it's almost satirical. If the UK experienced a power outage, someone would probably publish a think piece suggesting Meghan unplugged the grid from California. The irony is that Meghan, being described as happy at home, is treated like suspicious behaviour rather than a success story. She's built a life where her children aren't constantly scrutinised, where privacy exists, and where she isn't required to perform resilience for public consumption. That choice unsettles people who believe access should be permanent and unconditional. And let's inject a bit of humour here, because sometimes that's the only sane response. The phrase Meghan Part 2 sounds less like serious commentary and more like a movie pitch that never made it past the brainstorming phase. Spoiler alert, the audience already remembers how hostile the first release was, and blaming the lead actress for not wanting a sequel is certainly a choice. What's really brewing beneath the surface of all this isn't concern for reconciliation or connection. It's frustration. Frustration that Harry didn't buckle. Frustration that Meghan didn't fade into the background. Frustration that their decisions continue to centre well-being rather than approval. And that discomfort leaks out in the form of loaded questions and recycled blame. If Harry does return to the UK more frequently with Archie and Lilibet once security is properly addressed, it will not be a victory for critics. It will be a decision made from a place of responsibility and control. And if Meghan chooses not to accompany them, that choice should be understood within the context of everything she's already endured, not twisted into another indictment. This story is not about ultimatums or dramatic triggers. It's about boundaries holding firm in the face of pressure. It's about a man who learned from history and refuses to repeat it. And it's about a woman who recognized that peace is not something you negotiate away to make others comfortable. If you're tired of commentary that pretends hostility doesn't exist while actively fueling it, and if you appreciate honest analysis that doesn't default to scapegoating, make sure you support Sussex Insights by subscribing to the channel. Like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for more discussions that cut through the noise instead of amplifying it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.